Hey, good evening everybody. Tonight I'm going to show you how to make frosted brownies. This recipe is dangerously easy to make, okay? And I'll warn you in advance, it's very high calorie. So what I do is when I make these, I either gave them away, or what I'll do is, like tonight, I'm going to cut them up after I'm done and freeze them, so you can enjoy them in very small batches. There's two components to this. There's the brownie part. Now, for those of you familiar with brownie recipes, you will notice for this one I got a little light on it. I eased back on the sugar and whatnot because I personally find that if I'm going to have a frosting on a brownie, and I'm using my chocolate buttercream for this one, half a recipe of that, I don't want the brownie too sweet because then it's just got this kind of like sickly sweet, you can't eat it, right? Which is probably a good thing in the end. But so what I've done is I've made it sort of a very light brownie. So if you're going to eat it by itself without the frosting, you might be a little disappointed, and hopefully you make them both together. So here's the list of ingredients. I always use my large pan for this. Now I've got the cup of butter cut up into cubes so that way it melts quicker, and I don't want this to brown for sure. So what I'll do is I'll just start it on low and kind of spread these out in the bottom of the pan while I get working on the rest of the recipe. Preheat your oven to 350 Fahrenheit. Then measure your flour into a small bowl. Baking powder. Just mix that up with a spatula and then just set it to the side for the time being. Measure your sugar in a small mixing bowl. I always use a metal one for this. Now for this recipe, I like cold eggs for this. Usually for baking you want room temperature, but because the butter and cocoa are going to be hot, you want this to cool off, and you don't want the eggs too warm because you don't want them cooking before they go into the oven. So just pop in those 3 eggs there. Add the vanilla. As usual, I'm using my own homemade. What you want to do is whisk that up by hand. Making sure that all the sugar gets incorporated. You don't want to have to mix this for too long, but just make sure that it's slightly frothy and it's really even when you pick it up like that, and let it drop off the whisk. If anybody's wondering what those dark flecks are in there, those are seeds from the vanilla beans, because you're always going to have a couple in there when you're using homemade vanilla extract. Okay, so let's check on the butter there. It has just melted. So I'm going to turn that off the heat right away and also remove it to a different burner and let that cool off slightly. That's cooling off a bit. I get my pan ready. Now I'm using a 9 by 13 by 2 glass Pyrex. This is my favorite pan for this. Now you can use a metal one. What's important is that you either use parchment like I am, or what you do is grease it and then flour it to make sure the brownies don't stick. Honestly, parchment is just so much easier. Next, get your cocoa ready. Now, if you're not used to working with cocoa, I strongly advise you to just get a tablespoon and spoon it into the cup, because if you pour it, it can get pretty messy, and cocoa is a bit of a pain to clean up. You don't have to tamp this down, but unless you're planning to spread cocoa all over your counter, you do want to just eyeball this roughly. It doesn't have to. So go back to your pan with the butter, dump all the cocoa in. To try to minimize the dishes here, I use the spoon that I stirred the flour with. And I'll get on the other side, or actually no, I'll just go left-handed on this so you can see better. And just mix the cocoa into the butter. The spatula is good to press out any lumps you might have on the bottom of the pan. Once that's all mixed in, mix the egg mixture and sugar up briefly, and then add that to the pan. It'll be fairly quick now, because even though the butter has cooled off, it's still going to start cooking the eggs now. And what I do is I'll borrow the spatula to get all of this out. That up. You want to be quick about it, because if you'll notice, it is starting to thicken up a bit, but you also want it mixed in evenly so the color is even. It's still a good batter. If you don't let your butter cool off enough and you put the eggs in, it'll just seize up like clay right away, and you're going to have more of a lump of brownies than a tray of brownies. So add all your flour at once. And just stir that in with the spatula. Now do you see what I meant about how easy this is to make? Oh my. Now, because your baking powder is going to start working as soon as the flour hits the wet ingredients, you basically want to try to stir this in as fast as you can. If you have a couple of white flecks of flour, I wouldn't be overly concerned, because you can see already this is starting to get quite thick. So make sure your pan is on a cool burner, not the one you were heating up on. I don't know if you've ever broken a Pyrex on a hot burner. I did once, and I will never forget that. And now, so you can see brownies make a fairly thick batter. So what to do now, eh? Okay, well, I will tell you what to do. I found a solution to this. So either you can just work it with the spatula and get a sore arm, or if you're using parchment, get another square, put it on top, and press. Parchment will cook up to 450 safely, and this is cooking at 350, so there's no issues about smoking with the paper or fire or anything like that. Now what you might have to do is briefly squeeze it. You are going to have a bit stuck to the paper at the end. You'll lose a little bit of this, but you're going to get a much nicer pan than you would have without it, and it will just peel off at the end. So if you do smell sort of what appears to be burning cake midway through, do not be concerned. That's just the little bits that got stuck in the paper. Okay, so you can see how even that is. That's going to turn out quite well. Pop that in the oven. That's heated up to 350 Fahrenheit. Now, if you want a soft brownie, cook it for a half an hour, 30 minutes. If you want a crispier brownie, cook it for 35. What I do is I just split the difference. It's at my phone for 32, 33 minutes. While your brownies are baking, get your frosting ready. Now, you can use a rotary mixer for this. I like using my stand mixer because it's just less work, okay? I have my butter ready. Now, I always, even if it's you can see with the knife, it's fairly soft because it's still pretty warm here. It's a little too hot to bake, but hey, I'm off today, so I figured I have to take the chance, even if it's a bit warm. So what I'll do is just get that cubed butter in here and start that on low. Add your vanilla right away. What that does is it sort of helps the creaming process along, even though it's only a teaspoon of liquid. Now for this, I got a fresh pack, pull back a little, I got a fresh pack of icing sugar. Now depending on what part of the world you're in, they may call this icing sugar, powdered sugar, confectioner's sugar. What it is not normal sugar, okay? You do need icing sugar for this to work. So I measured 3 cups of the icing sugar into a bowl, which I'm going to add a quarter cup of cocoa. That I am going to use the measuring spoon, just a regular spoon into the cup. Like I said before, it reduces the mess somewhat. Yeah, this doesn't have to be completely accurate. This will get blended in quite well, so you don't have to take too long. Just make sure that if you have any big chunks of cocoa in there, just break them up with the back of the spoon. Now, so we're going to stop that, lift the beater up. I'm just going to knock that off down into the bottom. When you're creaming butter, you want it to be soft, but you don't want it to get greasy, oily. That's why it's always better cooler than warmer if you can. So I'm going to spoon part of this in here. I'd say probably about 3/4 of a cup or so. Always start on low. This is probably going to make some haze. See that the frosting is starting to develop a color. When the sugar is starting to cream into the butter, you're safe to turn it up a bit. So when that's looking creamed, stop. Add another bit. I'm not going to scrape that off right now. I'll just kind of work around it. I'll put in about half of what I got left there. Yeah, as long as you're all inside the bowl, it doesn't matter if you get it on the beaters or anything, eh? No need to be formal with this. Pop that back down, lock it in. Always remember to lock your stuff in. Again, like the first time, once you start to see it develop a color, turn it up. Now you're going to notice this is going to start arguing with you, like banging around a bit, so don't turn it up too high. Dump the whole rest of it in. And while you have this on low, and just leave it on low, just go get your milk. My milk poured, and I will turn it up a notch or two. And you can kind of hear it really banging around there. So I'll slow it back. And trying not to touch the beaters, just put in a little bit of the milk. Now you should be able to hear and see the difference nearly immediately. It's kind of got a slushy sound now. So what you can do now is stop and scrape it down. You don't have to get too carried away with this. What you want to just do is grab any big white streaks of icing sugar that are still up the side of the bowl, because the rest should make pretty quick right now. That up again. Toss the rest of the milk in. And when there's no more milk left visible in the bottom to splash out, that's when you turn it up. Another scrape down just quick to make sure you haven't missed anything and it's all nice and even. Go a little bit more, just until it's mixed up the way you want. For this, I definitely do take the beaters off and scrape it very carefully. You don't want to miss any for this. So once you got that all scraped down, and I just leave this on the side and frost it right out of there when the brownies come out of the oven. Timer went off there, and I think the heat from the brownies is causing the camera to go in and out of focus. So, see, that's the nice part about this stuff, eh? I don't even have to wait for it to cool off, just comes right off. So much easier than greasing a pan. Now, I'll get in a little closer here and turn on the oven light so you can get a better look at the color. Oh, that's nice. Zoom in a bit. Gee, I wonder if it doesn't look better with the light off, eh? A little more chocolatey. There's that heat thing happening again. I'm just too close to it. Okay, yeah, that's got a really good color. Okay, I got a cooling rack on the counter, and I'm just going to carry this over there. I'm not going to be able to frost this until it's cold. But what I can do right now is just gingerly pull this out and place it on the rack. Now what I am going to do with a fork, off any burnt bits that I can see from the sides. See that? I'm just going to just get in there. Those are way overdone. But if you just have to have a taste test now, you can use that. Because I don't want any burnt bits in the brownie proper. After that has cooled down, I'm just going to want to scrape any crumbs off before I frost it. So I just thought I'd check in on this quick there. The easiest way to do that is just slide your hand under the paper. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to frost. Okay, what that also does by working your hand underneath it is, if you do it gently, what you can do is basically loosen up the paper enough that it doesn't stick to it. You see what I mean here? Now I'm not going to get too adventurous and like lift the whole thing off. Yeah, the brownies are enough to handle, so I'm just going to transfer it right to the cutting board. As you can see, it cracked a little, not a big deal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to frost it right on the paper, and then after I'm going to cut it. So just kind of evenly whop that on there. Now what you want to do with this is start with the spatula at the beginning and push down and away, but don't try to pick up anything, because if you do, you're going to get crumbs mixed into the frosting, which you really kind of don't want. But since they taste so good, I don't think anybody's actually going to complain on the appearance of these things. Now when you've got it nearly all spread out, you can either get yourself an offset spatula, which I still don't happen to have, so I'm just going to use a trusty butter knife. And using the back of that, apply the same technique, smoothing down and away towards the edges. Now, if you are going to freeze this, what you should do, if possible, is pop the entire cutting board like this into the deep freeze if you've got a chest freezer. And if not, it's going to get a little messy, because what I'll show you now is another way to do it. Because what you would do is you would freeze it partially and then take it out when it's half frozen, and then cut it. Into 4 sections like that. Okay, and then what you do with each section is you would just put a piece of parchment paper on top in between them and freeze them like that and take them out one at a time as you needed it. You could even actually cut it again further. And speaking of cutting it again, I think I will cut one of these open just so you can see what you get. Let's pick one of these here. So if you are going to cut these into servings, I'd probably do them in 1/8 like this. Yeah, it's really soft because it's so warm here right now. So I'll just finish cutting this one portion just so you can see. Yeah, get a bit of a better light on there, eh? So there's my frosted brownies. I do hope you try these. You will like them if you like brownies. And I hope to see you again. Thanks for watching. Oh, and one last shot. Yeah, I did decide to freeze 3 of those. And the parchment, they're really cold now. And the parchment will peel right off when you take it right out of the freezer. So you should do that before they're fully defrosted.